Barry's going to be thinking of his kids, his two daughters. They're only young girls, even though they're adults. They are still young women. Let's say women, they're young women. Barry, it's Barry, isn't it, the husband, isn't it? Barry will never confess as long as those two young girls are there, living, well, able to live under Barry's care. He will never confess. For that reason alone, he will never. You look at it this way. Those two girls are like two Suzannes, aren't they? I think all you guys who are travelling down to Colorado, over 1,000 of you probably will end up going. With the greatest of respect, those girls are like two Suzannes, if you will. What's Barry supposed to do? Go down for a crime and then perhaps something happening to the two young girls, with them taking over that house, or divvying up the finances from the sale of that house and then trying to live lives of their own. They're obviously close to Barry, aren't they? The girls are obviously, they appear to be a pair of daddy's girls, don't they? Or at least very family orientated girls, two very extreme family orientated girls. Now, are we supposed to assume that they could cope in the real world alone? Are we to assume that? Are we to assume that Barry is to prospectively assume their safety with living in this said real world? Are we to assume that Barry would presume their safety? Are we to assume that Barry would assume that in confessing? Are we to assume that Barry would? I wouldn't. I would not assume. I wouldn't. As long as I say that those two girls are like two Suzannes, aren't they? Barry's thinking if he's committed that heinous crime, Barry would only be thinking it would be making it worse if he confessed, because then it would be like putting a further two Suzannes at risk, wouldn't it? I think even if, God forbid, with the greatest respect, several of you guys coming over to Colorado have accidents en route, perhaps a fatal accident whilst you were there in Colorado looking for Suzanne. Even if that were to happen, I still don't think Barry would confess. I still don't. I think even if a knife was at Barry's throat, he wouldn't confess. I would assume Barry would allow his own life first to be taken than for him to give a confession. That is where my assumption lies. Definitely so. Yeah. His confession will be akin to putting two more Suzannes at risk. We all have to take a step back and do the maths here. Seriously, do think rationally and maturely and respectfully and unbiasedly. That's not the word, but it's the only word I can think of. To be able to take a step back, try and take a step back and a step out of the situation. As hard as that would be if you are family and close friends, aside, take that step aside and take a look down from a vantage point of above, from above, and just look at the cold facts, the before mentioned cold facts. What good would it do for you all to turn up at Colorado, to Colorado? What good really would it do? What good really would it do? I think you guys have all friends and family, Suzanne, and the two girls, you really have to take a step aside, take a step out of the situation, take a step out of the actuality, and look down from above and do the maths maturely and rationally and think, really, what good would it do to putting your own lives at risk, spending all that money? Really, what good would it do? Really, what good? And I assume the world's attention would be thinking what I'm thinking also, that really Barry would not be forced into a confession even if a knife were to his throat. I really do respectfully think that definitely in the public's minds they will be thinking that too, that really what good would it do? You can't tip someone upside down and shake him by the ankles for his money to come round out his pocket. You can't do that. You can't tip a man upside down and shake and drive his money. You can't, can you? You can't do that. You couldn't do it, could you? You couldn't take a person by their ankles and tip them, empty them of their money, could you? If they didn't want to. Get me? You can't make a horse drink at a trough of water, can you? You can take it then. Can't make it, can you? Can't make it drink, can you? AKA getting a confession from Barry. I think respectfully, you really have to take a step aside and do the maths before you all start travelling to Colorado. Yeah. Terribly upsetting. That's my view. It's my honest opinion view on this situation. The helicopter panning the above and exterior shots of the house where Suzanne lived. Terribly unattractive place, layout of the abode. Terribly unattractive buildings. Terribly unattractive architecture. Just boxes with roofs on, aren't they? Just looks like a compound. It looks like a compound from above. It just looks like a compound. Just roofed boxes, surrounded by the most beautiful scenery. But in itself, the accommodation simply just looks like a very large, luxurious, in size that is. But because of its architecture, just a compound. It looks just like a compound. Just look like a compound. I can really appreciate how Suzanne was wooed by this gent and the financial securities of it all in this gorgeous, attractive, scenic setting. And Barry's just gone and put a series of large four-walled buildings up with slanted roofs. And this look on Suzanne's face is probably, yeah, but look at the state of it. Which is my view. Look looking at what the helicopter was seeing from above. Suzanne was probably thinking, yeah, but it's not exactly attractive looking, is it? I really wouldn't know what to say if you're watching this, Barry. Would I recommend for you to confess? Would I suggest for you to confess, Barry, if you're watching this? I really don't know what I would recommend. Thinking rationally about it, taking my own words. I really don't know what to say. I really don't know what I would suggest, what I would advise for you to do. Do the girls have any aunties or uncles? We hear of the uncle, Suzanne's brother. He's not that old. In years. The granddad, he is mature. Could they go and live with him? Do they have other aunties and uncles they can go and live with? So you could confess. I would suggest confess if you could confess. If it was to not put the girls' lives at risk with your absence, I would confess, Barry. I would. Ultimately, Barry, you've got to think that the girls would survive. You know, they would. If you were to go down, they would survive. If you were to be convicted of this crime, the girls would survive. They would, Barry. Okay, not as comfortable as in this very expansive compound you built there. Not luxurious, maybe not so. But think about it, Barry. What kind of luxurious life would the girls have without their mother anyway? Just do the right thing.